Hello, guys and gals, and this is another episode of Album of Horses. This is episode 9, part 9. And this Album of Horses is a book by Marguerite Henry and illustrated by Wesley Dennis. And this is a 1965 copy of this book, so it is over 50 years old. Anyways, in the last episode, let me find it. We went over the Lipizan and the Mustang. And that means that we are ready for the Appaloosa. We are talking about Native American horses now, which the book refers to as Indians, which I'm sorry about that. I know the politically correct term is Native American. Anyways, but I will be reading it as verbatim from the book. This is just a notice, though, that I do realize that back then it was not it wasn't politically correct. I mean, today it isn't politically correct to call them Indians because they're not technically from India. But anyways, enough said. This is going to be about the Appaloosa. It is half dawn, gray, and still and cold. Standing hobbled, a bunch of spotted horses wake and snort to the morning. Of a sudden, all heads alert to hoofbeats, sounding afar off, now close. The stillness of the dawn cracks. Indian scouts ride to camp crying, "Awake, buffalo!" They run. Out of their teepees come the Nez Perce Indians, bows and arrows held high. They leap onto their spotted horses and, with eyes fixed on the scouts, take off through the trail winding between the trees and brush to the prairie lying deep in the shadow. Buffalo smell is on the wind, and now the shadow divides, breaking up into great lumpy beasts, scudding along the mountain meadows. The chase is on, over wide plains, up and down sharp hillsides, through untracked country. The horses charge, closer and closer to the mass of furry beasts. Arrows sing. The dawn is a whirlpool of fury, animals screaming and bellowing, Indians yelling, earth quaking to the thunder of buffalo feet. All along the trail, brown hulks fall, thinning out the herd, and after a while, the noise dulls and the chase is done. Full morning comes in a golden blaze, and with it peace to the Indians, and the pinch of hunger ended. Buffalo meat is good. The tongue and the fat are delicacies, and the hides will warm the squaws and papooses. To the spotted horses, too, morning brings reward, young tender twigs to chew, and a time for browsing. Then homeward to the sheltered valley of the winding waters. Of all the Indian tribes in the Northwest America, the Nez Perce were the wisest horsemen. As a squaw sorts berries, they sort and culled their horses. Cull, that's as in C-U-L-L, culled their horses. The poorer ones were traded off to be used as pack horses. The gentle, aged ones became mounts for the old people, but the swift ones, the tough and game ones, they were the buffalo runners, and they had no equal. They could travel the craggy mountain at full gallop. They could charge into stampeding buffalo and single out one for the kill. They were built for rough terrain, 4 feet turned in so they could toe dance the narrowest passes. Wide heels to make them sure-footed, thin tails that whisked through brush and briars without being caught. Okay, we are going to... Okay. Other tribes painted their horses for war and for the chase, but the Nez Perce horses were painted by nature. with a curious spattering of spots in clay red or jet black. Some spots were rounded like polka dots, some irregular as leaves, and some elongated like footprints. What did it matter that the hostile Blackfeet tribe had guns with flintstones? That's Flintstones, not the Flintstones like the cartoon. The spotted horses could outmaneuver their guns and outrun their mounts, and so the Nez Perce lived in security, migrating and hunting by horse and breeding only the best to the best until the time their horses were the most distinctive in marking and the fleetest of foot in the Pacific Northwest. When white men spied them, they said, "These are the swift runners that graze on the meadows made by the Appaloosa River." Soon the word Palouse, which means the stream of the green meadow, came to apply to the horse too. Palousies, they were called. Even the Indians began speaking of their red and blue Palousies, for most of them were red or blue roans, whitening towards the rump where the spots clustered. The Indians took a liking to the white-faced men. They invited them to feast on buffalo meat and wild thimbleberries, and they gave them presents of horses. The white men in turn sent missionaries to live among the Indians to teach them reading and writing. The missionaries disapproved of the fast spotted horses and of the constant warfare with the Blackfeet, so they showed the Nez Perce how to make plows and cultivate the land, and they gave them Bible names, calling their elderly chieftain Joseph, and changing the name of his son from Thunder Rolling on the Mountain to Young Joseph. Quiet years followed in which the spotted horses worked the rich soil of the valley. Then in 1860 a nugget of gold was discovered, and seemingly from nowhere came a stampede of men, gold rushers, who trampled vegetable patches and despoiled pasture land. Settlers came too, jostling the red man, squatting on his land, eyeing his cattle and his horses. Meanwhile, far away in the capital city of the United States, greedy fingers pointed across the continent, and voices blustered, "We must move the Nez Perce to a reservation." Agents came to the valley saying, "This spot is now too cold for you. You must go away to Idaho." Young Joseph was now chief of his tribe. He listened puzzled, by solemn treaty, his people had been given the land of the winding waters, the Wallowa Valley of Oregon. Words, he said to the argument. With a forked tongue, the white man makes promises. The words come to nothing. For answer, soldiers moved into the valley and drove the Indians out. Bewildered, they rounded up all their horses and tried to swim them across the Snake River. But it was flood time, and many of the animals drowned. Those left on the banks were stolen by the white soldiers and their guards killed. Young Joseph had tried to keep his tribesmen from going on the warpath, but now his blood was on fire, too. He became again Chief Thunder Rolling on the Mountain, and his fighting bore fierce testimony to his name. Outnumbering 10 men to 1, he and his small band defeated 3 armies within 60 days, and always the Indians had their families and household goods and remnants of their cattle to worry them. Their only ally were the spotted horses. 3 times they crossed the Continental Divide, only to find that the white generals had endless resources and troops. At last, after a flight of 1,000 miles, Chief Thunder Rolling in the mountains surrendered. "From where the sun now stands," he said, "we will fight no more forever." And they never have. Their surviving horses were taken away and sold until they became an almost forgotten breed. The last words of Joseph were, "We gave up all our horses, and we have not heard from them since. Somebody has got our horses." Time fell away. Days and years passed. In 1937, Francis Haynes, a student in Idaho, was poking and prying into the history of the Nez Perce Indians. In the midst of his searching, he suddenly became aware that the horses of the Nez Perce were running away with his thoughts. He began digging deeper into the past and discovered that 20 centuries ago, the Appaloosas were known in China as the heavenly horses and in Persia as the sacred horses. Through wars and conquest, he traced them from Asia to Spain to Mexico to the Pacific Northwest. Could he stand by and let a breed that had survived wars and centuries die out? He sat down at his typewriter and pounded out words that had a sting to them. They roused horsemen who scoured the valley and plains and mountain hideouts. They found a few of the spotted horses, and once again, horsemen began to sort and call and breed only the best to the best. Today, the almost lost breed is 1,400 strong. They are no longer buffalo runners. They are the range horses of the cattle country. And what of the gallant Nez Perce? Their descendants are now living quietly and peacefully on the Lapwai Reservation. One day a year at the National Appaloosa Show, a young brave is sometimes asked to mount a red or blue Palusi, decorated with the saddle, pad, and bridle, once belonging to Chief Thunder rolling on the mountain. Then a strong and joyous feeling comes over the spectators, white and Indian alike. It is almost as if the chief had come alive to speak for his people. Our spotted breed is on the comeback trail. The white scholar of Idaho spoke with a straight tongue. His words came to something. And we are ready for the quarter horse. Let me check. Yep, quarter horse. Okay, it says here. We're going to look at these pictures first. Quarter horses are amazing horses. I've had the pleasure of riding a quarter horse before. Okay. He is not a quarter of a horse, nor a quarter of anything. He is himself, the fastest piece of horse flesh in the world for a quarter of a mile. Hence the name. A name that has borne almost since the first colonists landed in Virginia. Long before the American Revolution, long before the creation of the thoroughbred, the quarter horse was an old established strain. He was bred for two purposes, to work and to race, and he excelled at both. On work days, he chased wild cattle, rounding them up and driving them into the cow pens, but on holidays, he was a racehorse. There was no smooth oval tracks in those days, only straightaways cut out of Virginia forest. Occasionally, the path was so rough that the men used their wives' big iron kettles turned upside down to scrape it smooth. Sometimes the racing strip was only 10 yards long, and sometimes it stretched out the full quarter of a mile. But whatever the distance, the colonists reveled in a quick flash of speed. It lifted their weariness, relaxed muscles aching from work of settling a new land, dulled the homesickness for the land they had left. It took only 2 horses to make a race, and any clearing to make a track. Owners made the best jockeys, with pantaloons bellying to the wind, and the kerchief tying down their hair. They urged their chunky steed to victory. All along the race path, white men in coonskin caps, red men in feathered headdresses, Quakers in sober black, cavaliers in their old finery, all shouted as one man, throwing assorted headgear into the air for the winner. The Indians who came to watch were friendly. They rode in from the backwoods on little Spanish mustangs, bringing an extra 1 or 2 to trade for tobacco or beads. It was easy to find a trader, for the colonists liked their wiry animal. It was the Mustang who had contributed speed to their quarter horses. The first settlers had bred their stout-bodied English horses to him, and in this way had developed a short-legged running horse for great strength and swiftness. The quarter horse was the first racing horse of America, and they became so... This is a long one. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, that's the thoroughbred versus quarter horse. I like the little pictures around the edge. Okay, we're going to look here. The quarter horse was the first race. The quarter horses were the first race horses of America, and they became so famous that people were referring to them by their initials alone. In early books, the letters and diaries they wrote of their CAQRH, meaning their celebrated American quarter running horses. They described them as being not very tall, but hardy, strong, and fleet. For nearly 100 years, the CAQRH was the only race horses in America. Then on sailing ships from England came the thoroughbred, and with his coming, the scene changed. Race courses were built a whole mile long. Flyweight jockeys were hired, and they wore bright silk jackets and jockey caps instead of pantaloons and kerchiefs. It was inevitable that the short-legged quarter horse and the long-legged thoroughbred should be matched on the new race courses, and results too were inevitable. The quarter horse jumped away from the starting point and led to the first quarter. Then the thoroughbred came on to win. The thoroughbred was built for sustained speed. Everything about him was long and rangy. Long legs, long body, long neck, even his ears grew longer than those of the quarter horse. He was built exactly like a greyhound, and he stretched out in his going like a greyhound. Pound for pound, the thoroughbred and the quarter horse weighed the same, but there the resemblance ended. It was a case of greyhound versus bulldog. The quarter horse was short-legged, short-backed, short-necked. Even his ears were short, little fox ears that they were called. Alongside him, the thoroughbred seemed almost gaunt, for the quarter horse was bunched with muscle. His chest, his shoulder, his forearm, his hindquarters bulged with layers of muscle. His jaw, too, was muscled and massive and broad, like that of a bulldog. It was inevitable, too, that the thoroughbred should be crossed with the quarter horse to see what would come of the fusing of these two breeds. Janus, the grandson of the Godolphin Arabian, was chosen to sire a new line of quarter horses. The horsemen waited expectantly. Would the blood of Janus streamline the quarter horse? Would it create a new strain of horse that could run an explosive race for an entire mile? No such thing happened. It was almost as if the quarter horse had been bred to another. The son of Janus clung to their dam's character with bulldog tenacity. They were still blocky in build and faster than ever on the getaway. But with each year, and as more and more thoroughbreds were imported, short racing died out. A weaker breed than the quarter horse would have vanished from the American scene. But he widened his territory. By riverboat and by pack train he moved westward, and once again his brawn and his speed stood him in good stead. The cattlemen of the southwest plains needed a chunky horse of immense power, one that could brace himself against the shock of 1,000 pounds of wild steer at the end of a rope. They needed a horse that could pound over roughed-up land, swim rivers, push through brush, one that could maneuver a prize steer out of the herd or a runaway into the herd. In short, they needed the quarter horse. He took root in the Southwest, especially in Texas, and as long as the range country endured, Texans say they will need him. What of his racing career over and done with? It was just beginning again. Cattlemen, like the early settlers, need to work off the loneliness of their jobs, and so they get together and match the sprinting skills of their horses. Often they use any level stretch of land and have little private races with their neighbors. But sometimes they attend the big quarter horse races, where the straightaways are smooth and harrowed, and there are grandstands and fence rails and all the fixings of fine tracks. In 1947, a quarter-horse mare, Barbara B., raced against a famous thoroughbred in a quarter-mile dash. The purpose was to prove the superiority of the thoroughbred. But history only repeats itself. The quarter-horse won. Short racing was not changed much since colonial times. colonial days. The track is nearly always a straightaway, and there is seldom a mechanical starting gate. The quarter horses jump out from the standing position, and there is no crowding at the turns, for there are none. Each horse stays in his own lane, or he is disqualified. At the start of the race, the horses are often recalled again and again, and only an animal with a good disposition could keep up his eagerness to go. Admirers of his placid disposition like to tell about the mare that pulled a washerwoman's cart down in Texas. The mare was a full sister to Kingfisher, a most CAQRH. If she had wanted to, she could have flown through the streets, pitching clean shirts high into the air. Did she do it? No, she obeyed the traffic laws and stopped at each customer's house. Nice as you please. As her brother became more famous, horsemen trailed the cart begging to buy or trade for the mare, but the washerwoman refused to sell. I ain't a-going to do that. I ain't a-going to do it, she flatly pronounced. I raised up this filly full on a bottle, and she thinks I'm her mammy. If I let her go, I'd only spend the cash, and then where'd I be? Back scrubbing clothes again, and no horse to tote 'em. For nearly 300 years, the quarter horse has been a distinctive type, but not until 1941 was he recognized with a stud book of his own. Now he's no longer just a type, no longer just a poor man's racehorse. He has his own registry like other breeds. At last, that bulldog tenacity has won, and with little fox ears pricked, he goes on in the tradition of his forebears, race horse and cow pony both. Then that will do it for this reading. In the next one, we will be reading about the Palomino, a beautiful horse, by the way, and this Shetland pony. So, this has been the Album of Horses. And if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Pardon me just a second. Let me do that intro again. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. And with that being said, I'm going to end the video here. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and have a great day.